As we think about that generation, and what he taught my dad and uncles and aunt, I think is so significant. And now here we are, getting together to think about them and to talk about them, more specifically about my dad. But thoughts and comments don't have to be. I don't think we need to make it just about Dad. He was just the last of them. And well, I'll leave. I have comments from Mike, cousin Mike, and I'll one of the phrases from what he wrote just came to my mind. I'll save that for his comments. But I'm holding. It's not a mouse butt. I know it looks like it, or maybe I'm going to do my makeup, but this is a microphone. If you're going to speak, you need to be holding this microphone, or somebody near you, if you got to hold something, somebody near you needs to hold it so that we can get it on tape. And Sue, Dad's wife, is very interested in sharing in this experience, even though obviously she couldn't be here. So everybody wave hi.
Okay, I'm Susie, actually named for Grandma Sue. One of the Florin kids, I guess. Oh, you can't hear me anyways. Like what? Okay, so one of the best ways I could sum up Grandpa Glenn would be to say that he was a teacher. He liked to share, like Uncle David said, what he knew with everybody, and he was really good at it. He liked to take us out into the forest and show us all the different trails and tell us what he knew about the forest and anything really. Like he knew a lot of stuff. If you had a question about drywall, he knew. He could answer your question. It was just amazing how much stuff he accumulated and then liked to share. Not everybody has that gift, the teaching gift. And he was definitely a teacher, and just a patient man. He dealt with all of us kids, and like Uncle David said, I was part of that whole other group of people that came in after he graduated, and it was just a lot of kids, and we ran around Columbine Lake, and it was some of the best memories of my life, just getting to be a part of that. So, yeah.
So I'm Adrian Florin, also part of the Florin family. We spent our summers out there with Glenn and Susie's Columbine Lake cabin house. And I'm going to read some words my sister wrote. All right, so the first one is, these are her memories, right? Singing "I Am My Own Grandpa" by the campfire outside the Rutherford's Columbine home. Enjoying Grandpa's elk burgers from the elk he hunted or the rainbow trout he caught. The crinkles in his eyes he would get when thinking deeply or combing his hair. And I'll add toothpick in there. How patient he was every time someone from Columbine called to complain about his grandkids. Mischief. Well, that happened a lot. Spotting the white Columbine truck while we were out creating said mischief around the lake. Letting the Camp Rutherford teen counselors use his scout to drive to town and carry on with more mischief on Grand Lake. The scout was so old by then, it didn't even require a key. You could just turn the ignition. Telling me what to do if I encounter a bear when I accompanied him on trails to check water levels and trail maintenance. I was about 9. Listening to his 8 tracks and riding by Fall River Road in the motorhome. It was scary, but Grandpa was at the helm, so we knew he'd be okay. They used to take us camping in the campground up in the mountains all the time, and we'd pick berries and swim the creeks, and yeah, that was a lot of fun. Belt buckles. all the free in-depth history lessons on all the things Colorado, Georgetown, the great outdoors, animals, fish, and more. So we loved him and respect him. He was a great man. Played a big role into why I lived in Minneapolis for 15 years, 20 years, I don't know. We just moved to Colorado from those experiences. So yeah, cheers.
I got the privilege of being with my grandpa for like the last year he was alive. And my favorite time of day was when we would have dinner and him and my grandma would be talking, and grandpa would often tell stories of his life and in the past. And then my grandma would mention something and he'd be like, I can't remember what you're talking about, Sue. And she would like, no, Glenn, this. And he'd be like, I don't know what you're saying. And then we'd continue to eat, and then a little bit later he was like, oh, okay, I know what you were talking about now. Like dinner time was just the most enjoyable time for me because they were so funny, and I miss him a lot.
So I'm Mary, I'm Buff's daughter. So one of the memories that Angela and I were talking about earlier today was it was before kids, so Scott is 29, so it's earlier than that. I know, it's hard to believe that I was an adult then, because I'm so young. But we had some friends come in from out of town. They didn't live here, and it was the winter, and they wanted to see Colorado and do Colorado things, right? And so we decided, let's go snowmobiling. So we called Glenn and said, okay, we're coming up. We've got these friends, we're coming up. What do we do? Like, where do we go? Where should we take them? Do you have any advice or recommendations? And he's like, sure, come up and go to this place to rent your snowmobiles, and then I'll meet you there, and I'll just take you around. Okay, so we go into this snowmobile shop, and we're talking, and they're like, you know how small towns are you from here, blah blah blah. So we said that we were relatives of Glenn's, and they're like, oh, crazy Glenn. Yeah. Okay, so sure. So we got our snowmobiles and met him, and he had already come into town because we're like, okay, we're going to drive these things out of this road and find the house. We weren't sure about that. But he met us and took us out on these trails and took us all over, and we could not keep up with him. He'd have to keep coming back and be like, are you guys okay? Because we were trying. 70 miles an hour. Yeah, 70 miles an hour. We couldn't keep up with him. And so then we're like, oh, crazy Glenn. Got it. So
I'm actually surprised that they rented the snowmobiles to you, knowing that you're going to be snowmobiling with him.
I think everybody probably knows me, maybe not the younger generation, but I'm Barbara, Glenn's oldest daughter, which makes me one of the oldest people here. But Mom and Dad divorced when I was only 4. My brother Frank was 5, and Leona wasn't born yet. Yes, you were. She was not a year old yet. So, we didn't have the advantage of getting to actually grow up, full time with Dad. And then when Mom remarried, we moved to a little town in Kansas, which at that time the population was less than 200 people. So it's basically a farming community. And so that put us, a lot farther away from Dad. But we got to spend time with him every summer. Family was very important to Dad. I think that he wanted to have a big family because when he remarried, we got 2 more brothers and 2 stepbrothers, and that made him happy. He had lots of kids. But, and he always, the time that we did spend with Dad, he made the most of it because he took us on camping trips. A lot of times we come to Georgetown and meet, with the rest of our family. So we grew up knowing our cousins, which is wonderful. So anyway, we knew how much he loved us, and we got to spend a lot of time with him. So I'm grateful for that.
I'm Kathy. I'm John's second daughter. I have an older sister and a younger sister. The story, you mentioned the snowmobile. Uncle Glenn and I one time took off. We'd been up there to visit, and he and I took off on the snowmobiles. I'd never been on one before. And we're heading up into Rocky Mountain National Park. Well, he thought the trail that we saw some tracks on, he thought that was the main trail. Guess what? It wasn't. I dumped my snowmobile over, and neither one of us could find the bottom of that snow. It was light and fluffy, and here I've dumped this big machine over on its side. So we're both rolling on top of the snow, trying to get around to get that machine back up on its runners and get it out of there again. So it was quite the adventure. We didn't get back to the house until well after dark. Aunt Susan was getting quite concerned, but it was quite the trip. Our kids always look forward to going up there. The best story from our kids going up there was my youngest son. There was always the great big piles of snow, where they'd plowed. And our youngest son had been out there playing and comes back to the house and he's missing a boot. So we start looking for the boot. And I think it's here. So we dig over there. Maybe it was over here. So we dig over there. Uncle Glenn came out and said, I think we'll just send it to you in the spring, okay? So there you go.
All right, my name's Mike, and I'm from the Florence side of the family. A little bit interesting, I met most of you when I was a really little kid, because when David moved out of the house, I think a year later or so, I basically moved in. It was something like that. It was a very short period of time. And I was in an interesting position because my mother was a young single woman. And so I, in essence, spent most of my childhood all through my young adult years knowing Glenn and Sue, not as much as grandfather and grandmother, but more as father and mother. Because my mother, to me, was closer to my age. She was a kid when she had me, basically. So a lot of the experiences I have with him turned me into the man that I am today. And without that stability that he offered, I have no idea what would be happening in my life at all. I mean, all the memories I have from being a little kid and we're out, scrounging up deadfall for wood and cutting it up and doing all these things, it was interesting and eye-opening. Because later on in life, we moved back down into the city, and then here I am, this kid coming up from the mountains, born in California, spent quite a few years in the mountains, go back down to the city, and all these kids had no clue what the heck they were doing for anything. So all of that mentoring and I want to say all of that fathering, if you will, I think all the experience that he had and all of the lessons learned from all of his children most likely got dumped into me and some of the other cousins that were around too. So I want to not only remember him, but thank everybody else here, because that was just an amazing, amazing childhood. So I know for the last few years, I've been going back there to visit him every 3, 4, 5 months or so. And then we were there for the last few weeks, and he was, in essence, the same man right up to the bitter end as he was 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. And that was really good. But the amount of memories, I can just sit here for hours and hours and hours. So, but in essence, I think I would say that would be the best of all the memories and everything up there with all the friends and family and whatnot. But him, for me, that's who he was to me. In essence, father. So that was good. So
I'll share Mike's thoughts. Mike, for those of you who don't know, Jean and John, third born, they were twins. Mike is her youngest son and Cliff's younger brother.
Yes.
Youngest brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of your generation.
Yes. Yeah. Mike says, I'm writing this knowing that my cousin David will most likely be reading it, and he will bring a flair to the presentation that I could never match, and that is just one reason I love David. So,
Before we go any farther, Mike and David are like cut from the same cloth.
we're about 3 months apart.
Yes, and their
In
sense
age.
of humor, the things that they do, is that you might as well be brothers.
There's a great picture of me and Mike sitting on a couch. We're both about 3, I think, and he's pushing mashed potatoes out of his mouth. That's Mike. That's my cousin Mike. We're all blissful in our ignorance of the things that time and geography, heartless co-conspirators, steal from us. Let's start with the fact that I'm just now finding out that Uncle Glenn's middle name is Ferris. David, this is where you explain the origin of your dad's middle name, okay? I didn't know either.
What?
So earlier no, I didn't know where his his name is Ferris.
I do. I don't know where.
Well,
it came from, but I knew it
I'm pretty
was.
sure that I had been told, but I'd forgotten, because you know how.
I thought it was Frank.
No, it's Ferris. So I actually called Sue to find out where the name Ferris came from, but go ahead, Leona,
Well, I
since
didn't
you
know
already
where
knew.
it came from, but I knew his middle name was Ferris.
Oh, well, you knew it. Yeah, well, I knew his middle name was Ferris. Where did the name Ferris come from? The town dentist was named Ferris, so they liked him. Grammy liked the name Ferris, so.
Wasn't that in Gene's book?
What's that?
Wasn't that in
I
Gene's
don't. It might be.
I think it was in wasn't
Might-
it
might
in
be in
Gene's
Gene's
book?
book.
Yeah, it was in Gene's book.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the origin of the name Ferris. Growing up, I called him Uncle Glint because I was evidently hard of hearing at an early age. My personal recollection of Uncle Glint is that he could fix anything. In the decades of the 1970s through the 1980s, I know that he fixed every type of appliance and electrical device in my parents' household in Colorado and Arizona. My special memory is his repair of an old black and white television set that my folks had in Empire before we moved to Arizona. We didn't have a remote control. Heck, we might have had the oldest TV set in town at the time. I don't know. Anyhow, the on-off switch on our old television bit the dust, but Uncle Glenn fashioned a nifty toggle switch mounted to the side of the set, so it was a simple matter to flip the switch to the on position so that I could watch the Watergate hearings over my summer break.
I remember that TV.
Yeah? Well, we only received 2 channels there in Empire at the time, and that may account for my lack of interest in television. But I'll always be grateful for the genius that figured out that toggle switch, because Sanford and Son in black and white was a nice diversion. Thinking about it some, I've decided that the Rutherford boys and their sister were, for their time, Renaissance citizens, the likes of which we will never see again, and Uncle Glenn was the last of the lot. Who could have imagined that this group of small-town, Depression-era kids would experience so much and travel so far in the process? I browsed through some of Mom's memories of growing up in Georgetown, and having done so, I think that Jean and Glenn were true equals in their vulnerability. Jean because she was a girl, and Glenn because he was the baby. I suspect that this forged a special bond for them that may, in some ways, have been stronger than the bond she shared with her twin brother John. I'm only guessing now, but can you imagine the excitement that a little girl would have experienced having a little brother to dote over, especially as the only daughter in a family with a bunch of boys? I hope that Uncle Glenn knew and felt and recognized that love. I'm certain that he did. Perhaps, back to a more personal note, it occurs to me that Uncle Glenn took on so many of the aspects of my Grandpa Rutherford over the years that, to me, he assumed the mantle of the Rutherford line simply in appearance and bearing. Since this is, as I said, a more personal note, I'll let you decide when you look at photos of my Uncle Glint and compare them to pictures of my Grandpa Rutherford. You be the judge, if you like, but you won't convince me otherwise. Finally, blessedly, there's a family memory of Grandpa Bill Rutherford coming home from his work for the U.S. Forest Service and the Civilian Conservation Corps. Reportedly, on the way home, he would always stop along the way and buy 5 boxes of Crack Jack for the Hoop and Holler kids who were waiting eagerly for his return to Georgetown. Aren't those kids having a ball now? God bless them all for what they did, for what they gave us, for what they sacrificed. Thank you, Uncle Glint. Buy the work, know the workman.
Okay. So my dad, I'm Bobby. I belong to Barbara. So Glenn was my granddad. And some of my favorite memories are the snowmobiling. We would get up at the crack of dawn to drive to Grand Lake, but I knew it was going to be great when we got there. All the singing, my mom and granddad would play guitar together and we would all sing. That's my favorite. All the music. So my dad wanted me to share what he brought. He wanted me to speak for him. My dad said going to Columbine Lake was some of his favorite times. Thank you. And one time Granddad was redoing the signs. And he was making new signs, okay? So he had thrown these in the trash. And my dad asked if he could have them. So this is, if you remember, their address out at Columbine Lake. So my mom and dad took these home, they fixed them up, repainted them, and they still hang in your breezeway at your house? Yeah. So that's what my dad wanted to share with everyone. And my mom didn't know that he did this today. My mom didn't know he brought me. Okay, I'm done.
I'm DJ, Frank's oldest son, only son, but I don't have any real specific memories to share. Unlike some of you guys. Huh?
Louder.
Oh, louder, sorry. I don't really have a specific memory to share, but unlike some of you guys, I didn't get to spend quite as much time up in Columbine. We moved around a lot when I was a kid, so I don't have as many memories, but I do appreciate the memories that I do have that he provided by being there and providing that home, that giant home with all the family and the loving kids and everything. It was a great time. I mean, yeah, I was probably one of the ones that got some of the phone calls created sometimes. I know Michael was. But going up there, the snowmobiling, the playing in the snow, the snow forts, going down to the lake, getting in trouble. We were talking about earlier, just the fires, sitting by the fire and everything. So, I mean, that was great. And then later in life, got to see him a few times in Colorado Springs. And so I'm thankful for that I did get to have those times with him. There is one kind of semi-story, and you might have to fill in some of the details. So there was an incident on the snowmobiles.
There's always an incident on
Yeah, I believe it was Uncle Jeff.
Nobody got away with having an incident on the snowmobile.
I was riding with you on the snowmobile, and we went on across the lake, Columbine Lake, and it wasn't quite as frozen over as I thought it was. And Jeff got his snowmobile stuck, and so Dad took me, sent back to the shore, and went back out and then helped get Jeff unstuck before it sank. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were both soaked.
Yeah. So that's the only story I have.
That's not the only
Oh, really? You got any hunting stories?
In fact, I've got a story similar. But this time it was me that got bogged into the slush on the lake. Probably 11 o'clock at night. Jeff and I were out snowmobiling, and I got stuck. And so Jeff went back to the house. Now it is cold outside, and when it's like 5-10 degrees, and still, it's just really quiet. But so Jeff went home to get Dad, and here I am knowing that I'm going to be in trouble because I got the snowmobile stuck. So I'm just sitting there all by myself. I'm probably 12, 13, and so I'm just sitting there just crying, sitting on the snowmobile. Anyway, Jeff and Dad get back, and as soon as they get up to me, Jeff says, "Would you shut up? We can hear you clear back at the house."
Well, I'm Bert Rutherford, Bill, the oldest of the Hoop and Haulers. I'm his oldest son, and because I'm his only son. But Mike's comment about time and geography was really hit me pretty hard, because same thing happened after Debbie, my wife, after we graduated from college. I got a job in Texas where we could actually survive, and so we moved there, and so have for most of Glenn's life, I guess we were there, and so the only memories I have are when I was little, and when we were very little. Lynn, I don't know if you remember these, but we did some camping trips with Glenn and the boys, and so one memory, as I was thinking through that, one memory is for somehow Glenn got the job of wrangling, I don't know how many kids, probably half a dozen or so. And so we all wanted to go fishing, and I can't remember where we were, but it was on a river somewhere. And the bank was very steep, and so we get to the top of the bank, and he gives us this very stern lecture about don't run down the hill because you'll fall and kill yourself. So we all sat down on our butts, and we all slid down the hill, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is a lot of fun. Let's go do it again. But I just remember that because Uncle Glenn, I mean, he put the fear in us about we were going to fall down and hit our head on a rock and kill ourselves. And somehow we all managed to survive, I guess. So, and then the other story, mentioned a hunting story. We were up in camp and left, in the traditional way. Everybody kind of took their spot on the side of the mountain. And I hear shooting from way, way, way down on the side of the mountain. And I'm up about even with the bottom of the big Quakey patch, for those of you who have been there. And so I hear shooting. And so I hurry and I run and I top that little ridge, and here's this bull just standing there looking down the hill. And it was Uncle Glenn who was shooting at him from like 400 or 500 yards away. He wasn't even coming close. Well, he did. He did come close with one shot because he hit him in the foot. Anyway, I was very fortunate to be able to get that elk. And so Glenn comes running up the hill. And I had no idea who was doing the shooting, but he had to admit that it was him, and he probably should not have been doing that. So that's my Uncle Glenn hunting story.
Okay, so I'm Frank, Glenn's oldest, and of many. Many. Barb shared that every summer we'd come in and he'd take us out. I remember one fishing trip
I think we were in the red Chevy with the camper on it. But anyway, I don't remember where the location was. But here's what I do know. It was a little high mountain lake. And I've never seen fish as hungry as these fish were, because every cast, everybody was catching fish. We brought home a stringer of fish like you wouldn't believe. I don't know where it was, and I couldn't find it now if I wanted to. Yeah. But anyway. Bert touched on a hunting trip. That's where probably I spent most of my adult time with my dad, was in hunting camp. And him and whoever drew out for that season, whether it was Mary Lou or Buff or John or, well, probably not John, Bill for sure. And then, and DJ was on one of the hunting trips. That's where I spent most of our time together. And I learned a lot from him as well as the rest of the male whooping haulers. And Mary Lou was probably one of the best hunters of the whole group. Yeah. Absolutely, and Mary Lou, So anyway, fond memories from that. And I just like to thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My fondest memory of my grandpa and grandma Sue and of Grand Lake was the summer of 92, 93. We went and spent the entire summer, lived with Grandpa and Grandma, Bobby and I. I was going to be a junior in high school. You were already graduated. No, we lived with, but we lived with Grandpa and Grandma. Grandpa gave me my first job that I ever had. I was probably 16. I got to work at the clubhouse and in Grand Lake, the Columbine Lake Clubhouse. There wasn't much to do. I got to sit at the little desk, and that was about it. I mean, there was a pool there. People would come in and swim, and I guess I had to check them in, and that was about it. But it was my first job, and I got paid, so.
You're so cool to have that job.
Also that summer is when I met little Julie, little Susie, and Jenny, and Michael and Brian. Got to hang out with them all summer, and it's just, I'll never forget it. It was very memorable. We had a lot of fun together, and I'll love you guys forever just because of that summer we got to spend together. And one other thing I wanted to say, 2 Christmases ago, we went and spent with Grandpa and Grandma in Brownsville. And I just remember being really impressed with Grandpa because he was still telling us stories about when he was a kid, and I just couldn't believe that he could still remember all that stuff. I mean, he was just
He had a steel trap for a moment.
sharp, just sharp as a tack up until the very end. It was just, that was really impressive.
All right, I don't talk very loud, so if I'm not talking loud enough, tell me and I'll yell. Can you hear me?
Just yell. I can hear you, so I
know. Okay.
Just yell.
My memories of Glenn and the family, of course, began when I was little, but it begins with, I think we shared Thanksgivings. I remember Glenn and Betty and the kids being at our house for Thanksgiving, and I remember being at your house for Thanksgiving. And then, so that was the beginning. And then after the move to Columbine Lake, then we didn't see as much of you, but I have a memory of a family gathering at Columbine Lake, and I don't know what the occasion was. It was in August, so I don't know what the occasion was, but lots of us were there, and Keith and Kathy were there, and Brian was like 1 year old, or not even one, and Heather was not even one, and I forget who all else were there. There were some Florins there, and it was just such a warm, welcoming environment, which, I mean, it was all family, so it would be anyway, but Glenn and Susan were just so warm, and I always felt like Glenn was just such a gentle person, and that's if I had one word to describe him, it would be that, although there are many. But those are my standout memories. I think there's others, but that's it.
All right, hello, me again. My nickname from Grandpa Glenn was Mud. That was my nickname. I'll let you think about how I got that. So I've got a letter from Grandma Sue. And Sue Rutherford, everybody here knows when they became married and the story behind that. But what I do is I have a letter from her, and it's handwritten. So excuse me if I can't cleanly read it. So this is from her, and she wrote this and handed it to me a few months ago when I was down in Texas last. So, welcome family and friends to the place of rest of Glenn Ferris Rutherford. Thank you for making Glenn's final trip to hunting camp. Leading him to his final trip to eternity. This area is a place of legends for the Rutherford family. Stories shared of the past hunts and the stories from the year and the new, I can't read this part. Shaggy dog jokes. Shaggy dog jokes, or the shaggy dog to be. Glenn is the last of his generation. Here he joins two of his brothers, Buff and Bill. All of the hoop and holler kids are all rest now, waiting to be taken to the kingdom of heaven. Glenn was the finest of men, a man who knew what to husband meant to be, a good father, faithful and true, wise and gentle. Thank you, Glenn. Raised during the Depression, tucked safely with his family in Georgetown, birthplace of his mother and siblings, that is very hard to read.
Inherited.
He inherited the kindness and sweetness of his family. We have been blessed with his simple music. Probably. He sang us a song on the day he passed. Glenn lived to be 92 years young. The youngest of his family entrusted Glenn was the care of his 6 children, and then 6 more when Glenn and I were married in 1980. Glenn is loved by 28 grandkids. I was sitting down with her when she did all this math. 42 great-grandkids, or great-great-grandkids, and then 5 great-great-great-grandkids. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving a large family such a wonderful man to help guide us through our lives. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for joining Glenn, and for 44 years I was truly blessed. I can't read the last sentence there.
Go with God.
Oh, go with God.
I wanted to say one other thing. I think that the friendships and the connections we make with people in the innocence of our youth is some of the most important and profound connections you can have in life. These are the people, as we move through life, things happen, we get hurt, we lose people, and we decide, okay, nobody gets to know that part of me anymore. I'm going to put up a wall. Nobody gets to know that part of me. But if you look around, these are the people that have known you before any of that hurt, any of those walls went up, just you at your basic, this is me person. And those people that can accept that part of you and accept the changes in you as well, I think it's something really to cherish and hold on to. So I think just looking around here, all these different generations and these different groups of family members that I didn't know existed, it's just amazing that one person could touch all those different lives and make a difference. And we can all say, hey, I'm a different person because I knew him. And I think that's the best way to kind of live on, because now we can pass what the part of him he gave us to somebody else. So we love you, Grandpa Glenn.
We all knew Dad in our own ways, and it's been really beautiful hearing people's stories, and I know that I told Sue when I talked to her today. Oh, and by the way, which also reminds me, when I said of that generation, it's not just Aunt Glenna, it's also Grandma Sue.
Sorry. We can edit that later.
Grandma Sue's still there. But I said, when you sit down and you put some thoughts on paper, you sit here and you think, okay, well, I have this story. Well, it's like reaching into a barrel at bingo, and of the several 100,000 balls that are in there, you pull one out when it could have been any one of those. And so hopefully as you've been also listening to everybody's stories, you hear your own experiences and your own feelings also reflected. So that's also what I hope that you get from my comments here. I've known Dad pretty much all my life. Now I know that sounds funny, and I meant it to be funny, but it's also true in really deep and profound ways. Sure, it's obvious that ever since I was born, I've known him, but it's way more than that, because it's not just an external relationship in the way that you meet someone and over time you get to know them. No, I've known Dad all my life because he's literally a part of me. I mean, he contributed half my DNA 9 months before I was born, so I guess that's when it all started. Now that means that my thoughts and memories of Dad don't just come from thinking about things that he said or what we did together. Of course, those memories are rich and full. Dad often comes to mind in much more intrinsic or organic ways. For instance, if I clear my throat, I hear my dad. I hear my dad and my brother's voices too, especially my older brother Frank's. Often when I do or say something that reminds me of Dad, it triggers more memories. So I'll put a toothpick in my mouth, and just that motion conjures a picture of Dad working something out of his teeth the same way. And there he is, just in my mind right now. The words coming around the toothpick are all about the Rio Grande Railroad of the Southern Pacific, and how the discovery of gold developed and shaped Colorado's railroads and people and history. Or he's explaining the way water flows throughout Colorado mountains, down this drainage to that reservoir or river, or through some tunnel that diverts the western slope's greatest asset to the thirsty Front Range. I mean, you could drown in the knowledge that he had about all of that. Driving around in the car, a new noise comes to my ears, and I'm instantly diagnosing what that might be. What's the cause? And suddenly I'm remembering Dad craning his neck listening to some sound I couldn't yet hear. And that leads to remembering pulling the engine out of my old Bronco 2 that I bought from my brother Frank. Dad helped me rebuild that engine. My automobile fixing experience didn't start there, though. My education started under the old Scout, referenced multiple times, with me holding a flashlight while he pulled the oil pan or the transmission or replaced the distributor rotor, spark plugs, and wires. In fact, much of my childhood was spent holding a flashlight while he fixed literally anything and everything. Appliances, chainsaws, furnaces, tie rod ends, TVs, bicycles, swimming pool water pumps, you name it. I had a front row seat to all of that. And so when it was my turn to start turning the wrench, he held the flashlight for me, with lots of words of instruction edging around the toothpick in his mouth. Together we rebuilt engines, replaced clutches, thermostats, or anything wrong with the old cars that I had because that's all I could afford. Another pump of the handle on my reloading press seats the bullet in a .30-06 casing. That cartridge is for Dad's rifle, the first one that Uncle Bill made for him. In fact, it's the first rifle that Uncle Bill made, period, and he made it for Dad. Dad eventually gave that rifle to my son Evan, but in Dad's hands it provided plenty of elk meat for our family. I pull the finished cartridge from the press to inspect it, but what comes to my mind's eye is hunting with Dad in an area on the mountain that we call Park Place. It's about 10 minutes before we run out of hunting light, and from up above us, about 4 or 5 elk come sweeping down, crossing toward the edge of the timber. He swings that .30-06 smooth as can be into place, leading the front bull just enough, closes one eye and takes aim through the scope. A moment later comes a crack, and the bull crashes into the woods. Once we find him, we spend the next hour field dressing the elk. Well, to be honest, he field dresses the elk, I hold the flashlight. That mountain has a lot of memories. Every place on the mountain reminds me of time spent with my dad and uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, and even my own kids. If you walk with me there, you'll get almost as many stories as if you had walked there with Dad. As I sit writing my thoughts, to my right I notice a book on the shelf. That book reminds me of the last couple of visits with Dad and Sue. Dad's eyesight had deteriorated to the point that he couldn't read, and so I read that book, along with several others to him. I often think about the time that I spent reading to him, talking with and still learning from him. The conversations that we had in those last days are, and will always be, most precious to me. We reminisced. We shared some of our innermost thoughts and feelings. We prayed together. That time is sacred. Some time ago, my dear Aunt Jean gave me 2 photos. One was of her twin brother, John, sitting at our kitchen table in about 1968, with me on his knee. The other picture was of Dad and Mom standing together on the porch of our house that they had just bought in 1970. The difference in time between when the 2 pictures were taken made it so that each of the men were pictured at about the same age, roughly 38. I was 38 at the time she gave me those pictures. I spent a lot of time pondering those 2 men, pictured at the same stage of life I was currently experiencing. And I thought about how much I actually understood them. Uncle John I could speculate pretty well, but Dad, I knew. Because I've actually known him all my life. Whether through his DNA or his loving and careful guidance and instruction, he gave me his brain, his way of thinking, his temperament, many of his mannerisms, his hairline, his love of a good shaggy dog story, and so much more. I miss being able to call him up and discuss car troubles or to fill him in on this year's hunting stories, to ask him about Grammy and Grandpa or the other hoop and hollers, We're traveling down to Texas to visit him and Sue, sharing a bourbon and some jokes with him. But I am grateful that he's still so much a part of me, and that I will always hear his voice in my own. What more could I ask?